Rick Horrow, keeping score, one of the biggest issues we've always faced is the intersection of sports and politics, and there's always a rallying cry about too much taxpayer money and not doing it the right way and raping the taxpayers and why are rich owners doing it. It is always refreshing when you get somebody who not only did it right, but celebrates 20-plus years of the anniversary of doing it right with all of the economic impact attached to it, and now he can bask in the glory of everything in Oklahoma City named after he or his father. My friend, the mayor of Oklahoma City for 30, 40 years, Ron Norick. There's so much wrong with that statement. Sorry. So make sure you give it to me right. How are you?
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, it wasn't quite 40 years. Maybe 3 terms, 11 years would be more accurate. So.
All right. Well, you know that I embellish, but I also know that, and just so people understand, it is a community effort. Your father was mayor of Oklahoma City for how long?
He was 2 terms separated by a term. So back in the late 50s and then again in the late 60s. And then I came in 87, some 16 years after he went out of office the last time.
And he was the mayor for 8 years?
8 years, 2 4-year terms.
So there were 19 years of the Norick reign of terror that was bestowed on the citizens of Oklahoma City. Is that correct?
That's correct. From 1959 to 1998, that's correct.
And well-deserved. So Ron Norick, obviously the architect of many things, but including the cutting kind of right to the chase, a plan that we were lucky enough to work on together, but now 20-plus years of its success, metropolitan area project strategies called MAPS, kind of the creation of it, the intuition of it, all yours. Kind of tell the listeners about how it was hatched and why so unique.
Well, back in the 80s in Oklahoma, it was tough times. Oil was $8 a barrel, and we were predominantly an oil and gas state. We had agriculture, a number of other things, but, relied heavy on oil and gas. And so the state was doing very poorly. The city was doing very poorly. We'd have bank collapse. Only had one of our major banks that even survived beyond the late 80s. So it was desperate times. During that time, I came in office in 1987, not with any particular idea in mind on what to do other than I came out of the business community and wanted to create jobs. I knew the only way we could get out of where we were was we had to create jobs. So over the next 4 or 5 years, spent basically a majority of my time trying to pursue various economic opportunities around the country that were the rest of the country seemed to be doing very well. It was just really the oil industry and the banking industry in this part of the country that was suffering pretty hard, and we made attempts at several of them, and we always seemed to be the bridesmaid. We made the final list we'd always be in the top 3 or 5, and on several of them, we were the second choice. One being the Alliance Airport down in the Fort Worth, which ended up going there. Ross Perot, they were looking at Oklahoma and Texas, ended up putting it there, and then at the same time, American Airlines expanded in Tulsa, not in Oklahoma City. So although that helped the state somewhat, it didn't help Oklahoma City at all. And then the one that we worked on the longest and the hardest was United Airlines, which was wanting to build a maintenance center in Oklahoma City or Louisville or Indianapolis. Ended up choosing Indianapolis at the 11th hour, which was really a blow to us because we really felt like we had the best proposal, had offered the most, and it just didn't work out. And I just got tired of being the bridesmaid. And about a year later, thinking about that whole process, I visited Indianapolis. And as I was downtown during the lunch period, and there were people, there were restaurants, people sitting outside in restaurants, there were hotels, there was traffic, there was a lot of activity. And compared to Oklahoma City, which you could shoot a cannon down Main Street at 5:05 in the evening and not heard anybody, it dawned on me that I understood exactly why United Airlines went to Indianapolis. It was basically a quality of life issue. There was nothing here in the city, in Oklahoma City, that would encourage any company to want to bring their employees here, because we were basically a dead city. And so we had to take care of ourselves first before anybody else would even think about coming to the city. And that's really kind of what hatched the plan of MAPS, which is something that you and I worked on together for a couple of years before we brought it to a vote of the people. MAPS stands for Metropolitan Area Project. So that's kind of a real quick answer into your question.
Well, but the history of it is amazing, and the economic impact is amazing. And I think when you look back at it as a lesson for public-private partnerships, we've had Mayor Stanton on in Phoenix, and Mayor Ballard of Indy, and Mayor Johnson of Sacramento. And the one thing that's really important these days is public trust. And you have a multi-generational legacy in Oklahoma City, but people fundamentally believed in what you were selling and believed in your vision, which is not a small accomplishment, right?
No, and I think the reason for that, I always shot straight with them, told them exactly what I had in mind. I did the same thing with the press. I didn't lie to them or not give them correct information. A lot of times I couldn't give it the information at all, and I'd tell them, I can't tell you about this. It's, not for public disclosure. But so I think the people trusted me because I never went back on my word or did anything that would make the people think that way. Plus, the Oklahoma City citizens back in the late 80s and early 90s, like I said, this was not a good area to be. Jobs were leaving, and people were not happy. It was not good times, and so they were looking for something positive, and I just happened to be the messenger at the time. And so I think that helped a lot because there was a sense of desperation, not only with the citizens, but, and me as well, I guess, because we had to do something to turn this city around, and which we ended up doing.
Well, the other interesting thing, I guess, for people to hear, Ron Norick, the mayor of Oklahoma City for 11 years, and now on the senior golf tour. No, not really, but he's very active in civic and business things all over Oklahoma and nationally. The interesting perspective is that people want to reinvent history and think that the Thunder was born out of MAPS, and it was indirectly, but that wasn't the core and the main reason of what you were doing when you put this together. It brought a lot of national attention. Talk briefly about kind of the history of the NBA as it relates to MAPS.
Well, we built 9 projects with MAPS, which was a pay-as-you-go. We issued no debt. We issued no bonds. It was a limited term 1-cent sales tax for the citizens of Oklahoma City, which they approved in December of 1993 to build 9 projects, all the way from improving our fairgrounds on up to building a NBA/NHL type arena and a new library and performing arts center and a number of things. And the building was open. I think it was in 2004 when our arena was opened. And about that same time, or a year or so, or 2 years later, and I can't remember the exact date, Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans and just devastated New Orleans, and they had to find a place for their basketball team to play for the next year or two. And we were very fortunate that we had a mayor at the time, Mick Cornett, who is still our mayor at this current time, who made a call to the commissioner in NBA and suggested that we have a building here, and we can certainly make dates available. And also at the same time, Clay Bennett was involved, who is now the managing partner and the major owner of the Thunder today. And they made a pitch to David Stern, And, they'd never really heard of Oklahoma City and had no idea about it. And they made a visit, and, obviously they were, I won't say in desperation, but somewhat in desperation because they had to relocate this team somewhere on very short notice. And they brought the team here after the city guaranteed a certain level of ticket purchase, or the city itself would make up the difference. Well, that never happened. We far exceeded what they expected we would in ticket sales, and the Hornets stayed here 2 years and were very, very successful. And after that, then a couple of years after that, we had 2 years where we didn't have basketball. Then the Seattle Sonics were relocated down here and renamed the Thunder, and we have had sellout crowds for the last several years. You don't give up your seats because you're not going to get them back if you do.
It's certainly a different perspective as well. 20-some-odd years, which is one of the reasons why this peg keeps growing. People shouldn't forget it. You've had other votes on different elements of projects, the NBA piece and school piece, etc. The economic impact, the civic pride, what are you most proud of when you look back at MAPS and the 20-year history?
I just gave a talk not too long ago, and, as proud as I am of all the bricks and mortar, the proudest thing I am that I feel about is the attitude of the citizens of Oklahoma City. They went from not being proud of where they lived, almost being ashamed of living in Oklahoma City, to citizens that are very, very proud to say, I'm from Oklahoma, I live in Oklahoma City, I work in Oklahoma City, I raise my family in Oklahoma City. And so I think just the attitude of the people, this is a can-do spirit in this city right now. And anything that's really asked of them that, has foundation behind it, citizens approve. We have not turned down a bond issue, a MAPS initiative, or anything in the last 20 years, and it's just because now the people believe in their city and believe in their city leaders, and that's the thing I'm most proud of.
So, just kind of finishing up, what do you say to people who will question public investment in this kind of infrastructure, sports, arts, community development, basically saying that's for owners of pro sports franchises and the government ought to stay the heck out?
Well, I can't tell people what they need to do in their city. I can just tell them what it did in our city. It completely changed our city. But we not only built just a sports facility, and we also built a baseball park, but we've built 7 other facilities, mainly all but one of them are in the downtown area. And we rebuilt basically the core of our city, that were all facilities that were owned and operated by the city, like performing arts and convention facilities and so forth. And the whole idea was to make the people here feel proud of themselves, and we did it again, as I said, on a 1-cent sales tax that was terminated after 5 years. And the economic, and that raised $350 million. The economic impact now, based upon that and based upon MAPS for Kids, which was about $700 million. So you have, say, $1 billion of what I'll call public money. Now the number is north of $5 billion with a B dollars that have been invested, private investment in this community, and that would not have happened without the public dollar coming first. Once the public dollar came, then the private dollar followed, and it's still following long after the public dollar will be spent.
So now that you've done and quarterbacked and handed off the most ambitious public-private infrastructure projects since the New Deal, what are you doing for fun?
Well, I'm enjoying my grandkids and enjoy, kind of life a little bit, but I'm still involved with the city. I enjoy that very much, being involved with the city. I've always enjoyed being involved, and I like to kind of know what's going on. So, I'm doing that. Then I spend time in Arizona in the winter, which is pretty nice. I kind of avoid some of the ice and snow we might have here in the winter in January, February, and March. So I do that, and occasionally I'm lucky enough to see you and try to take some of your money on the golf course.
There's the answer, and by the way, this will run at and around the national championship, so I know there is a football team of some significant repute you're rooting for as well. Am I right?
Yeah, I think the University of Oklahoma. Hopefully we do well at the Orange Bowl, and then if we can get by that game and end up being in the national championship game in Arizona, I plan on being at that game. So it'll be fun and be good for the Sooners. I've been a Sooner fan for a long, long time, so it's great to have them back in the mix again.
Count on it. Ron Norick, the one of the visionaries truly on an international stage, and certainly Oklahoma City. Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.